Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to yet another webinar organized by the ICTCT. My name is Alexey Laureshin. I am replacing actually the regular host of the webinar, Stein Daniels, because he is on a long vacation in country far, far away. So he asked me to be his replacement. But the procedure will remain as usual. So we will have our speaker of the day, and I will present the speaker in a short while. And then we'll have also a short question and answer session. But before we start, I do have a couple of words and couple of reminders about upcoming ICTCT activities. So very, very soon deadline is for submitting abstracts to the extra ICTCT conference, which will be in Quebec City in Canada in May. The deadline is on 2nd of December. I think it's next week already. And of course, we have planned our regular conference, which will take place as usual in the late October. This time it will be in Berlin, Germany. And the host of the conference are the German Aerospace Center, the DLR. Also, the traditional traffic safety researchers course will be held in connection to the Berlin conference. So again, follow the news. Right now, it's not much on the course webpage, but the program will come relatively soon. And some other activities. So we do have the next webinar already in the program. So Sven-Ove Hansson, a professor in ethics and philosophy, who will be talking about ethics in traffic safety in February next year. Also, the Nordic Traffic Safety Academy School will take place in May. This time it will be in Trondheim in Norway. And also the relatively new subcommittee of the ICTCT, the AfroSafe Academy, also organizes a conference that will take place in Ghana, in Winneba. Yeah, and you can find those information and also all the new events upcoming. You can find it under this page, upcoming events of ICTCT. To be connected, to receive all the news, again, I remind you, please sign up for our newsletters, follow us on the social media. There is quite a big flow of updates coming there. And now, back to the webinar. So today I'm very pleased to introduce Therese Steenberghen. Do I say it correctly?
Yes.
Yes, perfect, yes. So Therese is an associate professor at KU Leuven in Belgium. She had quite some history with ICTCT. So I hope many of you recognize her. In 2022, she co-founded the Institute for Mobility, which is a research institute or department. It still belongs to university, as I understand, but very much future-oriented and focusing on inclusion. So it's not only men in the street who should benefit from mobility, but also all people in society. So without much ado, I think, Therese, the floor is yours. So please, you can take over the screen.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll share. Okay.
Perfect.
So thank you very much. What I will present for you today is basically a reflection after many years of research So I will go through different projects over the past 25 years and mainly bring together the main issues about what I call externalizing traffic safety issues. Before I start, I will briefly, let me see if I can, I will briefly introduce this Institute for Mobility. Basically, the core is that it's interdisciplinary research. So it is all related to mobility, but what we try to do is bring people together from engineering, geography. I myself am from geography and spatial planning, but also health, economics. So we approach different mobility issues from a multidisciplinary perspective. And that's exactly what I hope to bring to you today. When I proposed this title, let's not externalize traffic safety issues, the immediate reaction was, what do you mean by externalize traffic safety? Basically, what I do is I take a principle that is used a lot in economics, that is usually used to address indirect costs or benefits. But what is important is that it's to an uninvolved third party. So it's an usually unexpected or secondary effect that affects somebody who is not really benefiting or who is not really taking the measure. Traffic safety has for many years been considered a negative externality of car mobility, of auto mobility. What I want to present today is about possible external effects to third parties, and these external effects are not necessarily car related, but they are the result of the fact that very often we forget to control for consequences of measures, of plans, of the political decisions. So there are two parts in the presentation. The first is about reflections that we had based on different research projects where we analyzed from a geographic analysis point of view, how can we externalize traffic and safety, resolving a situation in one place and moving the problem to another, or creating problems elsewhere. The sociocultural is mainly about analyzing perception, but also how people experience and see traffic. And there, the externality is about how we can take measures for the average persons among us, but create externalities for vulnerable road users. So how not controlling sufficiently for what are potential impacts for more vulnerable road users can create unsafe situations. And then the last part is about the serious game analysis. I also want, before I move on, I want to mention that, as you will see in the references, most of the pictures I'll show you today are not from journal articles, but they are from posters, presentations at, for example, ICTCT police conferences. And I think it's very important as a researcher to present also at these conferences, and the reflections I get from these research projects are not so much about the research results, but about the feedback that I received at these conferences when presenting the results. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind, that the feedback may be even more fruitful than the presenting of the result itself and sharing the results. So let's move to the first part of the analysis. We start with something that we did 25 years ago, and then we really didn't like it anymore: black spot analysis, hotspot analysis. Why don't we like it? Because basically it's waiting for accidents to happen, and then we analyze where did these accidents happen. Now, there are a lot of critics about this approach. Not only we are waiting for accidents to happen, but also there is a tendency, if we analyze where accidents occur and we say, okay, this is a hotspot, we should resolve the problem here, then it tends to move somewhere else. And that's exactly what I would like to have a look at, because that can be an indication that we are externalizing the traffic safety. The maps that are presented here are from the city of Mechelen, where the analysis was conducted on traffic accidents in general. Then we looked at accidents involving cyclists, and we compared the hotspots for cycling accidents with the cycling infrastructure. So there we used the cycling accidents to make recommendations about where there is a mismatch and where the infrastructure should be improved, or where something should be done to prioritize or to improve the safety for the cyclists. How did we use this to understand the externality, the geographic externality of potential traffic safety measures? The city introduced a traffic plan. They made the city center car-free, and they created some loops where the cars could enter and then go to a parking spot and leave the city through another road. So what we did was compare accidents before and after. If we only look at the city center, of course, no more cars. It turned from a red spot to a blue spot. So the city center became very safe. But when we look at the border, the endpoints of these loops, there we discovered that there were more accidents. So we compared 3 years before and 3 years after. And what we see is that if we don't look carefully, we can create a little heaven of traffic safety, but the cars will go to another spot and it will move, and the traffic unsafety, we will create new unsafe situations. In the years following that, they modified the dangerous intersections. It's still ongoing in Mechelen. There is still major construction on some of these intersections, and they also slowed down the traffic to address this issue. But this map, I think, illustrates very nicely what I mean by think about the geographic impact when you create a safe area. So what I would say, and take that when we look at the 50-minute city, is any measure that affects car traffic, and we could generalize it, mobility in general, should be controlled for potentially externalizing issues to other places, traffic safety issues to other places. So we move on to a second research area where we try to understand vulnerable road users. So here the focus is not so much on the accidents, but on the travel behavior. And in the first part of this research, we focused on children, and we tried to understand how the perception by the parents of traffic safety affected what they allowed their children to do, how the commuting to school of the children, the travel behavior of the children would occur. So we analyzed the child characteristics, we analyzed the parental risk perception, and we analyzed the objective qualities of the environment and of the infrastructure to see how this would affect the travel behavior. The result of this, so we did that with surveys, extensive surveys and interviews. Then we put it into a model, allowing us to apply it to all the roads in this case, it was a municipality called Herentals. So these are the type of pictures that were shown. They were all pictures taken in the vicinity of the school or in the municipality, asking people in their known environment where they did send their children to school to say, okay, I would let my child cycle to school here. There were children between 6 and 12. Or I don't think this is safe enough, I'll bring them by car and make it unsafe for other parents or for other children. On the right side is the result of what was considered. So the black lines is what was perceived dangerous. Gray is what was perceived as being safe. Then we see the spots where the school locations are. And then the red triangles are the real accidents. And out of 10 accidents, 5 were where it was considered safe, and 5 were where it was considered unsafe. The hypothesis that the accidents would mainly happen not in the immediate surrounding of the school, but further away or at the border of it was not entirely true. So there is a real mismatch between what is perceived as safe, what is objectively safe, and that affects truly this mismatch. If the most dangerous situation is when it's perceived as being safe and it is not, because of course then the parents will allow their children to cycle there while in fact it is not safe. So there it's important to really adapt the safety situation. If the opposite is true, that is, it is in fact more safe, then it's better to communicate and to inform about this is really okay for the children to cycle to school. So what we learn from here, or the reflection from here, is that it's really important to acknowledge not only objective, but also subjective perceived road safety, and especially for the most vulnerable road users. We continued that same project by analyzing through eye tracking how children see the traffic and perceive the traffic. So there, what we did was show pictures and videos, and we asked, is somebody doing something dangerous here? Is something wrong? Then the children, there was no right or wrong answer, that the children looked at the picture and gave an answer. And what we analyzed there was not so much did they see the safety or the unsafety, but what did they look at to interpret the traffic? And when you, I don't know if most people are familiar with the analysis of the gaze, but the longer the fixation, the darker red. So when the children had to look for a very long time before they could answer, this is very dark. This indicates that it's difficult for them to understand. So very often it took quite some time, and it appeared to be, even things that appeared to be very simple were very complex for children to understand. And there was major difference among the children. Not only things that we predicted, of course, there is a difference with age, and they have learned traffic rules more when they are 12 than when they are 6. But so older children evaluate the situation better. But one important aspect, especially for younger children, that we had not expected, and maybe we should have, is that children don't pay attention to cars. It may be something we tell them very often, but it's not because they don't listen, it's because they are programmed, the brain is programmed to look more at other people. So for the child, they will see the face of the person cycling by, and they will fixate that more than the traffic light when trying to understand, is this unsafe or not? So what we learn from that is that the behavior of other pedestrians, other cyclists, is extremely important for the safety of children. But also that seemingly very easy situations are very complex for other types of users, like children. So we decided to also test this for a different type of vulnerable road user. We did it for visitors coming from very far, so in an unknown environment. That was nice being in Leuven. We also did it for Bruges, because we do have international events, so we took the advantage of getting people coming from China, coming from South America, people that had never been in this type of city before. And we simulated a situation where they would be at a railway station, and they had looked in advance or received some information about these are the nice things to see in Bruges or in Leuven. And then they took a virtual tour. While they did that, we also tracked what they were looking at. And here we took out of the pictures and we tried to analyze what is taking the attention of these people away from the traffic. And it was before, I think it would be interesting to redo this exercise. It was before everybody was looking at their smartphone to see how to navigate the city. But we did find some things there that were, well, also, again, maybe we should have expected, but you're not supposed to. So we laughed really when we compared men and women, because I mean, the gaze behavior was so different. I mean, women, it's almost caricatural. Women were looking at shops and men were looking at women. So, but in both cases, the gaze behavior is so much different that it's very dangerous to assume that everybody looks the same way. And there is also an important difference in the cultural background. The first time we move to China and we travel around, we are analphabets. We are unable to read whatever street sign is there unless we are in a very international environment. And of course, there is also the individual character of the persons. But the result was that people would not only look at different parts of the streetscape, but they would also hesitate at different points to find out, should I take left or right? And they did end up walking different routes. So what we learn from here is that it is important to acknowledge that other people perceive the urban environment differently. And therefore, and that's something we take for the 15-minute city, therefore it's important to control if we are not taking measures that are potentially affecting, creating unsafe situations for vulnerable road users. So I have to speed up a little, I think. I moved to the next study where we analyzed, this was an ERANET project, where we analyzed the introduction of new technology, in this case, the introduction of an automated self-driving shuttle. And very often people think, oh, this is so nice, then children will be more able to travel, old people that have difficulty driving will be more able to use this vehicle. We will not have to drive them around. So the question was, is this the case? And the difficulty in analyzing this is that we are trying to not only assess the current needs, but also the future needs of these vulnerable road users. So what we did in this case was, instead of quantifying, of measuring, we tested, we observed, and then we also did some simulations with a game. We asked questions, and mainly we listened to what they had to say. And then we came up with some concerns, and safety was on top of the concerns of older people when looking at how these shuttles could be operated in their environment. And it was very clear that there is a need for these vulnerable road users to have human contact, that the technology is threatening if it's not accompanied by possibility to contact someone if there is an unexpected situation. But an important lesson there is that it does help to listen to vulnerable road users, not just to understand their needs, but to help to listen to what they see as solutions. Very often, they come up with solutions that we would never have expected before. These solutions are not always all that difficult to implement. So we want to stimulate creativity, and we want to give opportunity to share among vulnerable road users what they found as a solution, because the peers are much more capable of finding a good solution than whatever expert could offer. So what if we apply this to the 15-minute city and 15-minute neighborhoods? And in some regions like Ile-de-France, they are even talking about the 15-minute region. I think everybody is familiar with the concept of the 15-minute neighborhood, the 15-minute city. The concept is proximity. We want to allow access to facilities within a quarter of an hour from home without using the car. we did a project for Brussels, and the city already had a model, and basically they wanted to improve their model in order to apply it in their SUMP, in their Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. Their existing model was only pedestrians, 15 minutes walk. It was a very limited number of facilities. They were using a lot of, there was a lot of data collection, but that was ad hoc. So it was very difficult to replicate and to update. They had the same needs for all citizens and the same needs for all neighborhoods. So what they asked us was, make this multimodal. We don't just want walking, we also want cycling, we also want public transport, and we don't just want 15 minutes. Some things, if you need to bring your empty bottles to, you don't want to carry them for 15 minutes. You may have some things you need within 5 minutes walk or 10 minutes walk. So variable times, thematic results, so differentiate different aspects of life, test out future scenarios, have different profiles of people, and differentiate for the different neighborhoods. And it had to be resilient so that it could be easily modified. When you see the green checks, those are things that could be implemented. What are things that were only partly implemented and that were most problematic? The different profiles. So having differentiate for different types of users and contextualize to the different neighborhoods. Not all the neighborhoods have the same needs. So when we see this, the multimodal, we do know that these are measures affecting car traffic, but we could not, it was generalized. The needs were generalized, and it was patchwork. All the neighborhoods were basically more or less treated in the same way, and it was very, we did not control. For vulnerable users, it was difficult to control. I will scroll quickly through the next slides to show what I mean by this. So this is the way the model was conducted. We had major long discussions about what should we take as input, what do people need to have within 15 minutes? Is a bakery the equivalent of a little shopping, or is a market? It was really ridiculous that we spent so much time discussing this, while the only people that know are the ones that live there. Do they like to have a bakery nearby or not? So the fact that we tried to model all this was really causing huge generalizations, and in the end, what we had was it was very hard also to understand how pedestrians move around, or cyclists, but mainly pedestrians move around in the city. Micromobility is extremely difficult to model. So people use shortcuts, people go through shopping malls or through campuses to get some places. So this modeling exercise basically is unrealistic. It gives an unrealistic image. It's a patchwork. We also, you can also see, this is really the shape of the municipality of Brussels. Of course, you have border effect. So there is a lot of room for improvement. But overall, what I think are two major aspects where we should look at is when you see the map, we need to acknowledge that this is patchwork. And we need to acknowledge that if we optimize a neighborhood for 15 minutes, there will always be other people that need to go somewhere else. So if we want to avoid this, to create unsafety and externalize safety issues to other neighborhoods, we need to control for it in advance. And another aspect, and that refers to these pedestrian cyclists and the different times, we also spend a lot of time discussing what we should take as average speed of a pedestrian come on. Do we really need to decide and to plan? We will always create issues if we don't acknowledge that some people walk at 2 kilometers an hour, or if we ignore that it's very attractive for young people to use some steps or to use, and a lot of people use technologies, micromobility aids. So we are not robots, and nobody is an average person. And that's basically the main conclusion that we have for this 15-minute city. We have a powerful tool. We can use the tool to evaluate impacts, but the tool is made for experts. And if we want the tool to work, it should be used in such a way that it empowers the local residents, especially the vulnerable road users, to identify what they want as a solution for their mobility. And then the model can be used to calculate the consequences. And that's what we are currently doing, or this is part of an ongoing project it's the upper project. It's a Horizon Mission Cities project, where we have 10 cities implementing or planning and implementing about 80 measures to improve public transport. So this is all about having multimodal hubs, having park and rides, shared parking space, making better public transport corridors. And what we did here was use the same idea of the serious game to test with vulnerable road users, and the type of vulnerable road users were very different. The board game was very different, and we had some challenges, and it evolved as we played it in more cities. But basically, before the measures were completely finalized, they were checked with vulnerable users in a gaming situation where there were simulations and where challenges, but also solutions provided by the users, were then shared with other cities. So at first, the cities were quite concerned because they said, we don't have that big a budget. But what came out of it was that very often what was needed to turn a design or a measure into a more safe measure for these vulnerable road users was a matter of fine-tuning rather than of having very expensive changes made. So listening to the people and providing tools to the vulnerable road users to not only say what their problem is, but to give their solution in their context, in their environment, I think is the way to go, is the next step that we want to reach in the research. And the nice thing about it, but it hasn't been published yet, so the report is ready, but what we expect to do is this sharing that we had among these 10 cities to also bring that in a system so that the challenges can be shared. If a blind person in Lisbon said, okay, I don't want to use these standard challenges, I want you to understand another one, that was a possibility. We called that the Joker challenge. So they could take a Joker challenge and say, this is something nobody had heard of. And then somebody in Leuven, a blind person in Leuven, may recognize this challenge and may say, oh yeah, I found this solution for it. And it really worked. It was amazing. So it's not just listening. So that's the difference, I think, with having interviews, and most cities have panels of users, but in this case, the participants to the game were not those that are in these existing panels. These are people that you would never reach before. That was another thing that we had when we introduced it, that the cities said, well, yeah, my grandmother, but I cannot ask my grandmother. Yes, you can ask your grandmother, by all means. If you know somebody that is willing to share and to propose solutions, you don't need to look for representativeness. And no, we just need to find a way to listen to those that always stay under the radar and get a very low threshold communication so that we understand, and then we allow them, we calculate the impacts of their solutions, and we allow them to share this with peers elsewhere. So that's basically the conclusion, or the overall conclusion that I have. I think it's important to control for externalities in terms of safety, but it's also important to not generalize and to have good tools to listen to the needs and the solutions of the vulnerable road users. And that's a feedback that we received when we presented this. There are also some long-term gentrification effects, but I don't think that is directly linking towards traffic safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Therese. We have a little bit time left for questions and answers, and to get some order into that, I would ask you, if you have a question, please just write your name in the chat and I will call you out in the order as the names appears. So you will have possibility to unmute yourself, to talk, but just like to organize the order. Yes, Jürgen.
Yes, thanks a lot. And thanks, Therese, for this interesting presentation. Good to see you, although it's only online, but I hope we will meet anywhere in the world. I hope so. We had a study in Germany where we found out that at the moment, if you switch 1 kilometer car traffic into 1 kilometer cycling, you have a risk by factor 10. So you have 10 times more accidents when you cycle 1 kilometer compared to if you go by car 1 kilometer. Of course, it is a statistic, and if you look on time spending, it's something else, but factor 10 per kilometer cycling, factor 5 per kilometer walking. And I have a thesis. I would say it is not so important if you affect car traffic when you do something for cycling in the city center. It is much more important that you look how you affect walking and cycling, because of course you affect people in a positive way, that they switch from car driving to cycling, but they will not only cycle in the city center, they will cycle outside. So it is much more important that you look on the surroundings and that you have a very good and safe infrastructure, because when you do nothing, than all we are doing at the moment for climate change and climate protection and a switch to cycling and walking would increase very much the cycling accidents and the walking accidents we have at the moment, and we have to do a lot to avoid that. So it might be that's an overlapping effect. Can that be? It's not only that you put the car outside, you create more cycling, and when you double cycling and you do nothing else, you will have 10 times more cycling accidents.
Yes.
That's the situation at the moment.
Yes, that's a situation that we see in Belgium as well.
Yeah.
So we see an increase in cycling accidents, and then we say, yes, but that's because we have more cycling. Now, the fact that we have more cycling, and also that there are the bicycles of today are not the same as those even 10 years ago. We have much more large bicycles, cargo bikes, fast bikes, heavy bikes. We have a lot of micro-mobility aid steps. And so basically, if we still think in terms of the enemy is the car, it's not going to resolve it. And we very often, our infrastructure is not adapted for the high numbers of bicycles that we have today. I mean, in Leuven, currently, the cycling infrastructure, even in very recently rearranged or redesigned intersections, it is impossible in the morning peak traffic as a cyclist to cross the intersection without committing some unsafe action. We need to acknowledge that the difference between the car, the bicycle, the pedestrian, that it's no longer different classes. There is a whole in between that also affects the traffic safety.
Yes, that's it. If I can, I would add one question more about young children and cycling. I have every time a discussion with the Netherlands, the colleagues from the Netherlands. We deal in different way with young people cycling. In Germany, it is not allowed to go to school when you are on an age of 10 or less. And then you have that cycling school in the secondary school together with the police at the age of around 12. And only then you are allowed to go to school by bike. And in the Netherlands, it is allowed from the age of 6. You can start by bike. I'm not sure what's better, because if you look on the behavior of young people, they are not in that situation that they really can cycle. And as you said, it might be that they are not familiar and they cannot drive safe at that age.
No.
But it may be better to bring them on the road earlier, because then they are getting familiar. Otherwise, you will have a lot of risks then. So what is better? What do you do in Belgium? What do you do in other countries?
Well, we had this discussion with people from health science, and they said, well, a small child, simply cannot see, for example, the speed of a car.
Yeah.
So if we allow children to cycle, we need to really understand what the safety issue is. If you tell a child, cycling or even walking, if you tell a child you should not cross when there is a car coming, but maybe the car is still very far, but they cannot assess the speed. So if we allow children to cycle or to walk in traffic, we should not just tell them look left and right. We should tell them if there is a car closer than that tree or that house, stop. And we also need to teach the car drivers that the child, there should be really a campaign. It should have been since many years. Always assume the child hasn't seen you as a driver, because you are in the car and the child will first look at people and not at cars. And the second thing is, if they cannot understand the speed, you should never slow down, you should stop. If you slow down to let the child pass, it's very confusing because they don't understand the speed. They don't understand if you're going to stop or not. And that's a typical dangerous situation, that a driver slows down and then children, but also older people, hesitate. Is he stopping or not? Shall I go or not? And then the driver becomes impatient. And so I think it's dangerous to say, well, the children cannot cycle yet, so they should stay out. We need to allow, because the same can be said of older people. The streets are for everybody, but we need to be sure that we understand and that we inform about what that implies for the other road users.
Thank you very much.
Therese, can you explain the concept of serious games? What is it about? You mentioned it several times. Serious games.
Oh, the idea of a serious game is, it's based on gaming techniques, but it is not only for amusement. So it is a way of simulating situations and allowing people to react or to act in specific situations that are where they are safe, but also where they don't have to be ashamed because when they play, they are not themselves, yet they are still themselves. So when they are in a serious game situation, they are more free to express themselves and to say, I would do this or that. You get, even if there are some people that have been conflicting before in a game, they are no longer representing an organization, or so in a game it creates much more possibility for empathy and much more possibility to freely express oneself. So the games that we had in the upper project, we took a map of the place, and the maps are very different. We took a map of the place, and then they throw the dice, or in some cases they exchange cards, and they had to move from one place to the other. And then they took a challenge card and they said, oh, something happens. The bus is crowded, or so what would be a solution? And there is no winner or loser, but you can only move on when all the participants in the game agree that this is a good solution. So it's not a solution for one, it's a solution for all. That's how it's implemented in this A Shuffle for Everyone and in this upper serious game. So it's really thinking together, oh, but I would do this and I would do that. And you come up, it's really amazing. It's a lot of fun to do, but it's also very nice to see how, for example, in Valencia and in Leuven, we had a similar situation that they had completely redesigned very nice bus stops. And these bus stops were accessible in wheelchairs. But then in Valencia, it was because of the sun. And in Leuven at the station, it was because of the wind and the rain. But it was not comfortable for people. So they decided to put some, in Leuven, it was plexiglass to break the wind. But the consequence was that with a wheelchair, you could no longer get on your bus over the ramp because it was now too narrow. And in Valencia, there was something similar with what they did for the shading. So through the serious game, we found that, the same thing in very different contexts can create a problem for this specific vulnerable user. And that's why it's so important to share the issues that were created and to learn from each other's mistakes, but also to share the solutions that are proposed. But that's a serious game. It's it allows people to speak more freely, and the threshold is much lower than having traditional fora to express concerns.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have time for maybe one more question. Any last minute? Because I have one. I saved it, but I can give floor for someone else if there are other questions from the audience. Okay, then to reconnect it to safety again, like I totally buy your argument that we need to ask users what they want. Like I totally agree with that. But on the other hand, and I think you showed even in your presentation some examples, people are not very good in understanding what is safe and what is not. Like, for example, with those child accidents, like locations which people rated as safe, there still were accidents there. So, like, do you see a conflict here, and what could be a measure to address that?
Well, I think it's a way to compare objective, to do safety audits and to compare objective and subjective safety. But in addition to that, I think it goes both ways. Because there is no way, I don't think anywhere in the world there is an expert that can tell what is safe for everybody. There will always be somebody, in a vulnerable situation with a condition that is vulnerable in a context. So I think what I learned most is we should be humble. The experts can help calculate what the impacts are, but in finding the solutions, I think the road users themselves are usually better.
Okay. So thank you very much once again. And actually, our time is up. So Therese, thank you very much for joining us today, for sharing your experiences. And I would admit it was a little bit outside the traditional scope of ICTCT. So for me, it was quite educating, not the least the serious games. I've never used that tool before. Yes, and the audience, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope to see you at our coming webinars. So there is one in February. You can already register for that one, and we do have some more in the pipeline which are not announced yet. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.